The new documentary, Who is the Best U.S. President for Africa, is a piece of work that examines the long-standing influence of American presidents on Africa, questioning whether any of them truly serve the continent's interest or simply perpetuate the U.S. neo-colonialist agenda. The film explores how the United States, through both Republican and Democratic administrations, continue to lead policies that exploit African resources and manipulate African politics for its global dominance, focusing on the stark contrast between Trump's isolationism and Biden-Harris administration's imperialism. The work uncovers the deeper motivations behind U.S. foreign policy. Through expert analysis and historical examples, the documentary raises the critical question: could Trump's chaos actually offer Africa the opportunity to break free from Western dominance and finally achieve true liberation? The film urges viewers to reconsider the U.S. role in Africa's future and explore how the continent can chart its own path towards economic independence and empowerment.
Kamala Harris could become the first woman president, echoing the historic significance of Obama's presidency. However, could her intersectionality be a tool for liberal political manipulation?
I actually do think that Democrats do have a program for Black America. Their program for Black America is white supremacy.
The platitudes that these politicians give to Black communities, it's laughable, it's ridiculous, and they feel like, oh, if I say these things, I don't actually have to do anything for them.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was Black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn Black, and now she wants to be known as Black. A lot of people coming from jails out of the Congo in Africa. Where do you come from? The Congo. We're in the Congo. We come from jail. What did you do? We will not tell you. And what's happening to our country is we're just destroying the fabric of life in our country, and we're not going to take it any longer. And you got to get rid of these people. They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Between bomb threats and evacuations, the city of Springfield has been on edge ever since Donald Trump amplified those false claims about Haitian migrants who live there.
What is interesting to me is how Trump's support amongst Black Americans has been consistently increasing in the last year.
Is this a case of internalized anti-Blackness?
Because for far too long, we were told we weren't even allowed to consider conservative views or conservative policies. We were called all these different slurs. And why is that? Because they wanted to take away our power. They wanted to take away our power to think for ourselves and to go out and seek the truth.
The two-party duopoly system is inherently flawed because it allows the Republicans to conflate white supremacy and conservatism and aligns the Democrats with every trending movement they can co-opt. They stand for everything, yet commit to nothing.
I said, what's your overall vision of foreign policy? And she said, to dismantle the American empire.
The research says you have never won an election. One thing that AOC has done that you haven't is win some elections.
So if you're just looking at this as what is going to happen in November, then you don't understand the strategy. You have to build a third-party movement.
But who is the better choice for Pan-African empowerment? Who will build bridges of hope rather than oppression? Is the chaos Trump brings exactly what's needed to dismantle Western imperialism and the white power structure? Or can Kamala break free from the imperialist strategies of her predecessors?
Barack Obama is one of the worst things that ever happened to African people, because it was Barack Obama who engineered African command by going into Africa, making African countries think they would be benefited by U.S. military presence.
Today we have AFRICOM and a growing number of U.S. bases and troops across the African continent. But if you look at where those bases are, it's pretty much a stripe from coast to coast across Central Africa. Why is that?
This is really the front line of the defense, if you will. What they want to do is extract as many resources as they can from the country and not let any of that trickle down. So almost all of them have states that have strong Western-backed, Western-armed, Western-trained militaries. They want to make sure that the existing neo-colonial setup is not destabilized by these conflicts.
People on the left are going to watch this. They're going to say, wait a minute, Eric Prince is talking about being a colonialist again.
Absolutely. Yes, pretty much all of Africa are incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens. Then it's time for us to put the imperial hat back on to say, we're going to govern those countries if you're incapable of governing yourselves.
Is Kamala Harris simply another political blackface used to strengthen Western hegemony? Though Donald Trump is labeled a white supremacist, could his self-serving brand of white supremacy actually dim NATO's light and weaken its neo-colonial influence?
One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills. Here's my plan to dismantle the deep state and reclaim our democracy from Washington corruption. We will clean out all of the corrupt actors in our national security and intelligence apparatus.
Dick Cheney has just released a formal statement, a public statement, in our nation's 248-year history. There has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump.
Will Kamala Harris seize this opportunity to lead Pan-African liberation, especially with Africa's growing global significance?
Because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn. She became a black person.
Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people.
If black women think Kamala Harris is going to get in office and take care of them, or they got something else coming. You know what she's going to take care of? Her East Indian immigrants.
Well, joining us to discuss our insights and the path forward for African development in an ever-changing geopolitical landscape is Kenim O, a dynamic filmmaker, entrepreneur, and African development business consultant. Kenim O is a recent graduate of Harvard Business School with a deep commitment to advancing Pan-African empowerment. She has dedicated her career to examining the complex intersections of global politics, economics, and African sovereignty. Her latest documentary delves into the critical question of U.S. foreign policy in Africa, exploring the new colonialist agenda and evaluating which U.S. president could truly benefit the continent in light of the upcoming U.S. elections. She joins us now. Good to have you on Newsday, Kenim O.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So let's start, from the question that you posed in your documentary. Which U.S. president, which next U.S. president do you think would actually benefit Africa?
The funny answer to your question is probably Jill Stein, but she's not going to win. She's a third-party candidate.
Oh, really? Well, but let's talk a bit, about this, your documentary. I'd really like to know what motivated you to look at this topic.
I think that a lot of people sort of like watch, the news, like mainstream CNN, like Western news, and they just believe the narratives that they see. But I think it's very critical for us as individuals, especially Africans, to look into history, to understand the dynamics of propaganda, and to also look at all sides of a coin. So don't just only watch CNN and see what they're telling you, but look around the world at how they're reporting this, and then look into African history to understand what perspective, and then draw your own conclusion. But I'll say the documentary has a good chunk of it that dives into the history of that has been underreported by the West and by Africa as well. And so it looks into that history, and then it poses the two main candidates, and then asks the question, who is the best?
So now you talked about, Donald Trump's chaos. Maybe it could just be the blessing that Africa needs. But then I'm wondering, will it not just drive Africa to look for aid elsewhere, making it probably further dependent maybe on China or Russia? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we should stop coming from a place of looking for aid. I think we need to start looking within and figuring out how to develop our own continent ourselves, because nobody is going to develop Africa but Africans. And so this sort of idea that we have to, a lot of people, sending their money to the West, it's part of the propaganda that we consume in Africa, that the West is better. But when you look at, the economics of, what's happening in the West, a lot of their economies are declining. You have Germany with a negative GDP growth, even the UK, very low GDP growth. So people are not looking at the actual, economics of it, and they're listening to the propaganda instead of thinking, Africa has some of the fastest growing economies. Maybe Nigeria, I'm not saying definitely invest in Nigeria, but Nigeria might be difficult right now. What other African countries have a high GDP growth? We have countries like Niger that has a 10.4% projected to be 10.4% GDP growth this year, which is unheard of. So I think we need to start looking at how do we invest in the continent instead of how can we go and get aid that will just put us in debt traps.
But, when you say that, I think it still sounds a little bit vague. How do we really begin to start investing in Africa? We know that the continent has experienced a number of wars. And right now, we also know that the continent is heavily indebted, to the IMF, to China, the West, Russia. So how do we really begin to seek other alternatives to develop the continent?
So I think the first thing I'll say is that just as with any investment, you have to investigate each individual investment. So each individual country, each individual sector. I give you an example of Niger that has a high GDP growth for the country, but you would have to go and investigate the different places in Africa that and you will see incredible growth in different places. That's number one. Then number two, I think the most important thing, the most critical thing that we need to master here in Nigeria is leadership and ensuring that we have the right people leading our country that ensure that our economy grows.
Now, on the global stage, African leaders are becoming increasingly vocal on being treated with respect. For instance, they're asking for a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. But then some analysts are wondering if Africa really deserves the respect that it is demanding, saying as the continent is still so underdeveloped, yet the leaders are living in affluence. What are your thoughts on that?
I say that power isn't given, it is taken. And so thinking this idea that your former oppressors are going to empower you, we need to let go of that thinking. And I think to every Nigerian, to every African, you have to think in that line. Power is not given. So you want power, you have to take it.
So what about our regional bodies, ECOWAS, SADC, or even the African Union? What role could they play in Africa's development? Can they even play any role in Africa's development, seeing the way they are now?
Absolutely. First of all, ensuring that we have strong economies. If you mentioned ECOWAS, ensuring that our currencies are stable, that's the most lucrative thing. I know that they want to have the ECOWAS currency. They're looking into developing that, but we need to be wary about that because they're talking about it being backed by France, which will just put us in a similar economic prison that they've put other Francophone countries in. We should look at what are the options for us. Maybe, well, there's no BRICS currency yet, but that's also an option for Nigeria. I know Nigeria originally wanted to join BRICS. So we need to look at ensuring that our currencies are stable and also investing in critical areas. So I know everybody wants to start a restaurant. They want to start all these sort of surface level businesses that don't actually develop an economy. I will say, look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and pick an industry that will actually develop Nigeria. And even in Nigeria, with this economy, you will make money. So it's not everyone is always thinking consumer based, but think about what is the supply chain that actually builds or develops a country and an economy. If you invest in that, you will make money in Nigeria.
No. I'm so happy to hear you sounding optimistic, and I hope, I really hope that comes to play. Now, let's go back to your documentary. What were some of the challenges that you faced in putting that documentary together, and how were you able to navigate it, and how well, has that documentary been received?
So I'll start. It's been received quite well. We released it on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube right now. I would say the main challenge is it's a 3-hour documentary, or 2 hours and 44 minutes. So it's the longest one I've done thus far. But I've been having conversations about these elections, and I've been just hearing all the lack of information that people have on sort of like the dynamics and the histories of, the US and Africa. And, I was fortunate to, go with Obama on 5 Africa trips across Africa in about a decade ago. And that gave me a lot of insight. I was a member of the White House Press Corps, and it gave me a lot of insight to, some of that dynamics, some of the conversations that he was having 10 years ago. And to see 10 years later, we don't see much improvement at all. That just, raises questions. So for me, it was really about digging deep, getting research. So there was a lot of time of, research, digging deep before I actually came and put it together.
So before I let you go, are you looking, at maybe putting it up for awards? And then what other projects are you working on at the moment that we can look forward to?
So I have a YouTube channel called Business in Nigeria, which is about investing in Nigeria. And we have a few, quite popular videos on there. I will be doing, I'll be doing a few others, a lot more documentaries on that channel. So definitely check it out. But specifically about the economic warfare against Africa and what we can do as Africans to develop our continent. So, and I look at it from a Pan-African lens. And so, yes, there's a lot coming on there, so definitely stay tuned. I do have something on the ECOWAS currency. I'm doing a deep dive on that also, so definitely stay tuned for that.
Well, filmmaker, entrepreneur, and African development business consultant, Kenim O, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.